he's a deviant, and he plays with dark magic. These are facts. And you always see these people who have these meteoric rises. Nobody's giving them, nobody's backing them. They just like they did it from the ground up. And the trade-off with that is you have to perpetuate darkness.
The story everyone thought was finished may actually be starting to unravel again. When Sean Diddy Combs was finally taken into federal custody, many believed the entire scandal had reached its final chapter. The courtroom doors closed, the sentence was handed down, and the hip-hop mogul disappeared behind prison walls. For a moment, it seemed like the storm surrounding him had finally settled. But now something strange is happening. Prison records have begun shifting quietly in the background, and the countdown clock tied to Combs' freedom is suddenly moving faster than anyone expected. According to updated information from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Combs' projected release date has been pushed forward to April 25, 2028, more than a month earlier than the timeline that was circulating only recently. The change appeared without announcement, without explanation, and without any public statement. Yet when dates begin moving like that inside the federal system, people who understand how prisons operate usually assume there is more happening behind the scenes. Combs is currently serving a 50-month sentence following a 7-week federal trial tied to transportation for paid encounters connected to the so-called freak-off gatherings. Prosecutors originally pushed for a much harsher punishment, more than 11 years behind bars. Instead, the music mogul ended up in a low-security federal facility in New Jersey. There, he reportedly works in the Chapel Library and participates in programs that can reduce time off an inmate sentence. But the timeline attached to his case keeps shifting, and when a federal sentence begins shrinking in real time, it almost always raises questions. The official explanation arrives quickly and sounds simple enough. The Bureau of Prisons database now lists Sean Combs' projected release date as April 25, 2028, roughly 5 weeks earlier than the estimate reporters were seeing only a few months ago. The change appears quietly on the federal in Mac.
If anyone, I'm happy to go. So we think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean, the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no trafficking, there was no racketeering, everything was consensual, everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror, one that we did not choose, and that he second-guessed the jury.
Combs was transferred to FCI Fort Dix after sentencing, and almost immediately, the timeline around him began to shift. At first, his projected release was listed as May 8, 2028, then the date suddenly jumped forward to June 4th. Later, it shifted again, sliding backward toward April.
Constitutional. We think that a jury verdict should mean more than our jury's verdict seems to mean, and so we are planning to appeal.
Each update forced observers to recalculate the math. On paper, these adjustments could look routine. Inside the federal system, dates change all the time. But the pattern here has begun to raise eyebrows among those closely following the case. Instead of feeling like standard bureaucracy, the situation increasingly looks like a clock that someone keeps adjusting from the inside. Part of the confusion comes from the sentence itself. During the trial, federal prosecutors argued that Combs' alleged pattern of exploitation demanded a punishment strong enough to send a clear message. They requested a sentence exceeding 11 years, but when the judge delivered the final ruling, the number was dramatically lower, 50 months. Even that figure carried hidden flexibility. Once time already served was credited, the effective stretch began looking closer to 3 years. Alongside the prison term, the court imposed a $500,000 fine and 5 years of supervised release. Inside the courtroom, Combs also offered a public apology. He described his past behavior as disgusting, shameful, and sick, acknowledging the damage caused by his actions. The statement quickly spread across headlines, creating the image of a fallen mogul expressing remorse as he faced the consequences of his past. At that moment, the narrative seemed clear. A powerful figure had been held accountable. But as observers look back now, watching the timeline of his sentence shrink further inside prison walls, the situation begins to feel far less straightforward. If the punishment was already far below what prosecutors requested, and the release date continues moving even earlier, some people are starting to ask whether the full consequences have.
2 months?
4 years, 2 months in prison.
Wow.
He served a year. He gets some time. He gets 15% credit, so he'd be at 14-ish.
2.5 years.
2 months. So, and then he gets another 15% in the remaining.
Yeah.
He's out in 2 years.
Yeah. Should have stuck with the original guest.
I know. Yeah.
Combs reportedly spends much of his time working in the prison chapel library, helping catalogue books and assisting with administrative tasks. His legal team specifically requested this facility during sentencing because of its proximity to family and the programs available there. One program in particular has drawn attention: the Residential Drug Abuse Program, commonly known as RDAP. Within the federal prison system, completing RDAP can reduce an inmate's sentence by as much as a year. Lawyers across the country are familiar with it. For many prisoners, it represents the most common path to shortening time without appealing a conviction. According to statements from his representatives, Combs spends his days reading, writing.
Diddy, obviously just starting out his time, well, not just starting out, but starting out his official sentence since being sentenced not too long ago. And I think suffice to say, it's not going well so far.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's got 4 years and change that he's going to ultimately have to serve, although he has served already a year as he awaited his trial and then went through his trial.
Exercising and participating in counseling sessions focused on sobriety and personal accountability. Supporters repeat the same message again and again. Prison has forced him to reflect. On paper, it fits perfectly into the redemption narrative the system often promotes. But that image starts to crack once other voices from inside Fort Dix begin speaking out. Reports surfaced claiming Combs was caught with a fermented drink, allegedly brewed from Fanta, sugar, and apples, a homemade alcohol mixture that occasionally circulates in prison environments. According to sources familiar with the incident, staff initially considered transferring him to another unit as punishment before ultimately reversing the decision. The claim raised eyebrows for one specific reason. Just weeks earlier, Combs had told the court he was sober for the first time in 25 years. In a letter submitted to the judge, he wrote that the person he once was had disappeared behind bars. "The old me faded in jail," he wrote. "A new version of me was reborn." The line spread widely online as a symbol of transformation. Then the rumor about the fermented drink appeared, quietly complicating that image. Inside prisons, contradictions tend to travel quickly. Guards hear them, inmates repeat tea. According to Telfair, Combs seemed comfortable navigating prison life. "He's holding it down," Telfair said, describing the mogul as being in good spirits while adjusting to the environment. The phrase quickly spread across entertainment media. Supporters interpreted it as a sign of resilience. Critics heard something very different, a reminder that the man who once dominated celebrity culture still carries influence, even behind prison walls. Telfair also noted the dramatic shift from Combs' previous lifestyle of luxury parties and late-night excess to the structured rhythm of incarceration. Yet the tone of his comments never suggested someone broken by consequences. Instead, it sounded like someone adapting quickly, and that adaptability raises new questions. Federal prisons operate on a system of incentives. Good behavior earns time credits. Participation in programs opens doors to earlier release dates. In certain cases, cooperation with investigators can create opportunities that never appear publicly on official paperwork. None of those explanations are explicitly attached to Combs' updated release date. The database simply changed, but people familiar with high-profile federal cases are quietly asking the same question. What else might be happening around this sentence that the public hasn't seen yet? During the trial, prosecutors described a network of gatherings known as freak-offs, events they claimed involved coercion, manipulation, and elaborate arrangements that crossed into criminal territory. Witness testimony included disturbing descriptions of control, intimidation, and violent outbursts. Those claims formed the backbone of the prosecution's request for a decade-long prison sentence. When that request collapsed into 50 months, and the timeline continues shrinking, the gap between expectation and reality becomes harder to ignore. Outside prison walls, the ripple effects refuse to settle. Civil lawsuits tied to the scandal continue to multiply. One complaint involved.
The thing is, all of those things that you just said are also included in the racketeering count. So we don't know what the vote is. It's hard to read
It has simply shifted arenas. Cultural reactions have added yet another layer of tension. Rival rapper 50 Cent, whose real name is Curtis Jackson, has repeatedly mocked the Combs family online throughout the trial and after the sentencing. At one point, Christian Combs fired back in a social media comment, calling Jackson a senior citizen while referencing complicated personal history involving Jackson's former partner Daphne Joy. The exchange quickly turned into another viral headline. On the surface, it looks like a typical hip-hop feud, but the timing matters. Every online jab keeps the scandal circulating through the entertainment world. Then an older chapter resurfaced. Former Danity Kane member Aubrey O'Day appeared in a documentary revisiting past allegations connected to Combs' influence in the music industry. In the film, she reads from an affidavit describing an alleged studio incident from 2005 involving intoxication and disturbing behavior. O'Day said she does not clearly remember the event, but began questioning her past after seeing the document. She also recalled receiving explicit messages from Combs during the peak of her career and believes rejecting those advances contributed to her removal from the group in 2008. Watching the footage left her shaken. According to O'Day, she began hyperventilating and crying as she processed the allegations being reconstructed on screen. Her testimony added another emotional layer to a story that many believed had already reached its conclusion. That atmosphere matters because federal sentencing rarely exists in isolation. Judges often weigh reputation, influence, and public accountability when determining punishment. During Combs' trial, prosecutors argued that his wealth and celebrity gave him the power to control environments where harmful behavior could occur. The judge acknowledged those concerns when announcing the sentence, stating that the punishment needed to send a message about exploitation and violence. Yet the final
charge. And a lot of people saying it's square peg, round hole, that we know that there are multiple jurors on both sides. It's not just one holdout, that on racketeering, they are stuck. But they have reached a decision on trafficking as it results with...
Was the sentence itself already the compromise? Or did the real negotiations begin only after the courtroom cameras turned off? Because here's where the story becomes difficult to ignore. The Bureau of Prisons database continues updating quietly. Rehabilitation programs operating in the background, civil lawsuits keep appearing. Old allegations resurface through documentaries and interviews. Rival artists continue mocking the downfall. And through all of it, the calendar attached to Combs' sentence keeps shifting. In federal systems, those kinds of changes rarely happen without paperwork and justification. But the public rarely sees that paperwork until long after the decisions have already been made, which leaves observers asking one unavoidable question. If someone who faced more than a decade in prison ends up serving something closer to 3 years, and that timeline...
You had day 17 on the Diddy trial as the biggest one yet. Guess what? Bingo, you won, because today was probably the most eventful day as far as things that happened that were said on the stand, and most importantly, things that the judge said, because Diddy almost got kicked out of his own...
Shrinking. Who actually benefits from those changes, and what information might be moving quietly through the system to make them possible? If you want, I can also turn this into a stronger viral YouTube script with better hooks, retention loops, and a powerful ending to increase watch time. Here is a continuation, extended, rewritten section you can add to the script to make it longer and keep the suspense building. The deeper people look into this case, the harder it becomes to treat the shifting timeline as a simple administrative update. Inside the federal prison system, sentences rarely move without reason. Every adjustment requires documentation, approval, and justification. Credits for good behavior, program participation, or pretrial detention can all affect the final date. But when the calendar keeps changing around a high-profile inmate, observers start paying closer attention. And in the case of Sean Diddy Combs, the stakes are unusually high. For decades, Combs stood at the center of one of the most powerful entertainment empires in hip-hop. Through Bad Boy Records, he helped launch the careers.
Same kind of extortion that we heard when Cassie took the stand and testified on that airplane ride back from France. Diddy said, "You don't do a freak-off, I'm going to release one of the freak-off videos that you are profiled in and humiliate."
That influence is part of why investigators spent years examining the network around him before charges were ever filed. According to prosecutors, the events described during the trial were not isolated incidents. Instead, they argued that Combs created an environment where employees, performers, and associates were drawn into situations that crossed legal boundaries. The gatherings described in testimony, often referred to as freak-offs, became one of the central themes of the prosecution's case. Witnesses described elaborate arrangements involving travel, entertainment, and private encounters that investigators believed went beyond consensual adult behavior and into coercion and exploitation. Those allegations formed the foundation of the government's request for a sentence exceeding a decade in federal prison. But when the verdict arrived and the sentence landed at 50 months, the reaction across legal circles was immediate. Many observers felt the punishment was dramatically lighter than expected. Now, as the projected release date inches closer, the debate has started all over again. Some legal analysts believe the explanation could be straightforward. Federal prisoners can accumulate time credits under reforms introduced through the First Step Act, which expanded opportunities for inmates to reduce their sentences through rehabilitation programs and positive behavior. Under that law, Participation in educational courses, counseling programs, and job training can gradually reduce the time someone spends behind bars. If Combs is actively completing those programs, the shifting timeline might simply reflect credits being applied. But others believe the situation could be more complicated. High-profile defendants sometimes possess information that investigators consider valuable. In rare situations, cooperation with ongoing investigations can influence how sentences ultimately unfold. Even after a conviction has already been secured, none of that is publicly confirmed in.
Judge who this job was a upgrade. He took a massive pay cut. He was an accomplished litigator. He has a pedigree that most law students would envy, and he's a very, very brilliant man. And
O'Day described moments during her career when she felt pressure to conform to expectations that went far beyond music. In interviews, she has suggested that rejecting advances or refusing certain situations may have contributed to her sudden departure from the group in 2008. Those claims were never part of the federal criminal charges, but they contribute to the broader narrative surrounding Combs' legacy. For some observers, the situation represents a long overdue reckoning within the entertainment industry. For others, it raises questions about how many similar stories may still remain hidden. Even the reactions from other artists have kept the controversy alive. Rapper 50 Cent has been particularly vocal throughout the entire ordeal. Through social media posts and interviews, he has repeatedly mocked Combs' legal troubles, while hinting that the public may not yet know the full story. At times, those comments have sparked heated responses from members of the Combs family, including Christian Combs. What might otherwise be dismissed as typical hip-hop rivalry now carries a different tone because it unfolds against the backdrop of an ongoing legal and cultural scandal. Each viral exchange pulls the story back into headlines again. Meanwhile, inside the walls of FCI Fort Dix, life moves at a much slower pace. The man who once commanded red carpets, music awards, and billion-dollar business deals now follows the strict routine of federal incarceration. Wake-up calls arrive early. Daily schedules revolve around meals, work assignments, and program participation. Inmates line up for counts, attend classes, and spend hours inside common areas or recreational yards. For someone who once lived in luxury mansions and traveled the world on private jets, the contrast is dramatic. Yet, according to people who have interacted with him inside the facility, Combs appears to have adjusted quickly. Whether that adaptation reflects resilience, influence, or simple survival instincts remains open to.